Okay. Well, again, good afternoon to everyone. We hope you all had a beautiful and warm Memorial Day weekend, given the circumstances. Today, I am more than pleased and happy to present on the topic of housing and how it pertains to Sigma Chi specifically. So this is a journey, and we know that. And we have an esteemed crew to help present on the topic today. And I'll get to who everyone is in a minute. We do have quite a few attendees today, so if you do have questions, please feel free to put them into the box. And what we're going to do is keep a log, and any questions we may not get to or may not have an answer to today, Justin Brandt from RMF and Chi has graciously volunteered to take down those questions, and we will send out a follow-up with answers to every question that we address today. So with that being said, I'd like to start by getting to our first slide, which is basically an introduction as to who we are and what we do. And I know that the Constantine Housing Initiative may be something that's new to everyone. So I'd like to start off by introducing myself and give a little brief overview as to what Constantine Housing is. My name's Joe Fee. I am a graduate of Bradley University, and I am the managing director for the Constantine Housing Initiative. I joined the team in early January, and it's been quite interesting and a journey, to say the least, moving from there. But in addition to myself, we have Steve Davidson, who is the executive director of Risk Management Foundation. And it's important to mention the Risk Management Foundation because Constantine Housing Initiative was developed in a support function of the Risk Management Foundation. The Constantine Housing Initiative is somewhat of a new invention of what used to be the Constantine Capital, which many of you may be familiar with. Constantine Housing Initiative now has the capabilities to provide an array of services. We can provide financing internally. We can do that uncapped. We can provide resources that can help with property management. We can step in and preserve title, quite a few things that we can do. And we work hand in hand, not only with Risk Management Foundation, but also the Grand Trustees. So again, to the slide that you see on your screen, we have Steve Davidson, Executive Director of RMF, myself, Managing Director of the Constantine Housing Initiative, followed by Justin Brandt, who's the Operations Director and plays a dual role. He's working with RMF and Chi. Also on the line, and we're very happy to have two members of the Grand Trustees. First, starting off is Mr. Brother Rich Ronick. He is the chairman of the Grand Trustees, followed by Mr. Ted Pitt. He is a Grand Trustee and board member for the Risk Management Foundation. So you'll see all of our contact information up on your screen. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for your time, and we appreciate you joining us today. With that being said, moving into the topic at hand, which is housing. And at any time, I'm going to be referring to my panelists and other esteemed colleagues on this call. We're going to jump around a little bit, make this much more of a conversation. So again, if you have questions, please feel free to type them in. We will get to them as quickly as we can. We've made plenty of time in this presentation to allow for questions. So we're going to get through the basics, and then any questions that you have after that, we'll make sure that we get to. So with housing, know what we don't know. And I don't want to be cliche through this entire webinar by any means. I actually want this to be pertinent and relevant information to each of you. So the variables are changing on a daily basis. I have personally attended about 12 webinars at this point. I'm trying to just gain a gauge as to what the entire environment looks like. How are we going to approach it? What are others doing? And the one common theme through all of this is that there is no constant. We are getting drastically different information today compared to what we were getting in April, in March, and even a week ago. And so what we need to know is we have to be flexible. And as we work from a macro level, that being the Constantine Housing Initiative, we are using and relying on the Grand Trustees to guide you guys on a micro level. So we will get involved to whatever extent that you guys need us to. We're developing relationships and getting ideas from an overall broad point of view from across the country. And then we're relying on our boots on the ground, those Grand Trustees that have a ton of knowledge and relationships with the chapters to find and seek those chapters that haven't already reached out to us, and the Grand Trustees will then guide those house corporations to the correct resource, which in many times will be the Constantine Housing Initiative. So what I'm gathering personally around the country is that everybody's planning on opening at a different time. If you wanted to use a general sense or point of reference, maybe a benchmark for lack of a better term, what we're finding is that if you're in the dead center of the country, your school is more likely to open as opposed to being on the coasts. So the Midwest, we're seeing reports that most schools are preparing to open. They're taking the precautions and steps necessary to make that happen. And as you inch closer and closer to the coast, and once you actually hit the coast, we're seeing that those schools are reporting a late opening closer to fall break, and in some cases have already reported that they're not opening until January. So you can use that as a benchmark. It's very difficult to gauge to know who and when is opening. We do have at headquarters a comprehensive list trying to track what every school is doing. But again, it's different depending on where you physically are geographically. One of the things we want to really step in and help do and help portray, and I'm going to rely on the Grand Trustees, Rich and Ted, on this section of housing, is creating a strategic plan for the closing and the opening of your property. This is going to be unique to just about every house. For example, are you going to be using one or two entrances? If you're using one entrance, it's much easier to control who's going in and out, track who's going in and out, and possibly even have a locking system so that you don't have people in your house that shouldn't be. It's obvious that you're going to need to control who your guests are. The number of brothers inside of the property at one time. From what I'm being told, I've personally been working with individual chapters on an array of topics. And one thing that comes up is when this whole pandemic hit, one of the things that happened is these undergrads picked up their belongings, threw them in a bag and left. Some of them left quite a bit of personal belongings behind. And how do you handle that? So one of the things we need to make sure that we are aware of is having them come to pick up their belongings. And this needs to be coordinated by the house corporation or the house manager to allow for a staggered time. So it could possibly look like having time frames from 1 to 2 p.m. we have this set of brothers coming in. From 2 to 3, we have this set of brothers. Could be a one in, one out type situation depending on the layout of your house. We do have relationships, and I was talking about the macro level that Constantine Housing is working at. We have formed relationships with 2 major vendors that could come into play with you immediately. And most of you are actually utilizing them already. The first being Service Master. SRM is the acronym they use most regularly. We do have a national contract with them. They do have the ability to provide sanitization services. We have pricing on that, roughly 40 cents per square foot. And we also have a partnership with HD Supply, which can get you any and all of the cleaning supplies you need to manage your house. And I don't want to just limit that to cleaning supplies. HD Supply has an incredible portfolio, and I'm going to provide their contact information for both of these vendors on the very last slide of this presentation so you have it. But we also can send this out to you regularly via email if you needed it. So between those 2 entities, you can start to think about opening and closing your house. Before I go further on that, since we do have the Grand Trustees along with RMF on the phone, do you gentlemen have anything to add to that or anything that you wanted to pinpoint exactly to help these house corporations along?
I think one of the things that we have to do as far as the house corporations are concerned is to touch base with the, whether it be the house managers or the president of the house corporations, and get a handle as to where they are in the closing sequence, how much of it is left in disarray, how much of it has really been packed up and out, what are their conditions there, and then what are their internal plans that have been worked out in coordination with probably the university or the local health departments as to what their reopening guidelines are going to be, so that, you know, the services we have available can dovetail and maybe even set the bar for what's going on their local campuses, because that's scattered all over.
That's a great point. That is a great point. And it is interesting to see, as I've been communicating with house corporations, as to where everyone is in this process. So we have some house corporations that had time to sit down, create a strategic plan, get their brothers safely out. Others were caught dead in the middle of spring break and were just simply told, don't come back. So it is important to partner with your house corporation and your grand trustee, your house manager, and even the university, because some universities, especially those chapters that have university-owned housing, they do have plans in place in some cases, actually in most cases, on how to get those personal belongings out. So I actually already see one question: who's responsible for implementing COVID protocol? And it's actually no one at the moment. It actually falls on the individual who owns the house. And in that case, most of the time it's the house corporation. And so we don't want to leave you out there. And we're not just saying, hey, house corporation, go take care of this. What we're trying to do, again, at a macro level, is provide as much support and service as we can, then have a basis to work from, and then dive in individually into each of your unique situations. So again, does that coincide with what you were kind of thinking, Rich?
Yeah. Well, the other thing too that we have to do is also establish, I want to say, a confidence factor among the brothers as well as their parents, the families, upon that return to school. Have all reasonable precautions been exercised to make the house, or not make, to create the house environment that is decontaminated, sanitary, and quote safe under the current understanding as to what determines safe, to move back into the premise. There's a lot of things that are coming out as far as, what are the standards for decontamination. CDC has theirs, NIC has theirs, the local communities have theirs. It's not going to be a situation, I think, in which, one case fits all. It's going to have to be modified in working very closely with each of the campuses and the communities where we have our house corporations. It's going to be a very, I want to say at best, a collegial relationship that has to be established.
Understood. Yes, and I'm actually seeing some of the questions come in about that. It's a difficult question to specifically answer who's responsible, because every house is different. Now, most of the people on this call are probably from house corporations, and it is the house corporation's responsibility at that time, but it has to be done in conjunction with your local codes, your university, and your IFC in some cases. Your Inter-Fraternity Council is also going to have a big role in this. So while we as Sigma Chi, or we as the Constantine Housing Initiative, or RMF might say, okay, go ahead and start opening your house, that could be completely against what your local jurisdiction is saying, what your university is saying. And the last thing we want to do is go against their efforts, start bringing students back to campus when they're not ready. So it's going to be a big collaboration, and we're here to help that along.
I think one of the things that we could do, Joe, is to follow, if we're using, let's say, the CDC's general guidelines, and if they're in coordination with NIC, I would think at least then we have a basic frame of reference in which to use, and whether it is superior than local ones, then we'll be on the plus side. If it's not, then we have to deal with it.
Absolutely, and we will have documentation, and we'll continue to send out documentation as we receive it. We're in constant adherence to CDC, local state guidelines, national guidelines, and we have put out there for some of the house corporations the information we already do have. SRM, again, the partner that we have on a national level, has put out a guide to opening. So we did get that sent out to all the house corporations, and we can send that out again if you'd like. And we also, again, have been able to utilize them to set up standardized pricing. Something that's big to note is the no chapter left behind, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but it's to ensure, and RMF has made a commitment to ensure, that no chapters left behind not able to pay for a cleaning service when it comes to your mortgage. If you have one with the Constantine Housing Initiative, we're going to make sure that you get through this. So I want to make sure that that is first and foremost prevalent throughout this conversation, that RMF had recently provided to the leadership of the fraternity a commitment to make sure that no chapter is left behind. And so you will be taken care of. You should not have a worry that your chapter is going to go bankrupt or not have enough guys in the house to pay your standard bills. We're going to make sure you get through this. And a lot of that has to go with the coordination between CHI, RMF, the grand trustees, and everybody in between. And as I say that, the next bullet point you're going to see on this specific slide is to have multiple financial plans prepared. I'm personally working with most chapters on a 6-month, 1-year, 3- and 5-year pro formas, or other words, a budget. That has to happen naturally if you are getting financing from CHI, so that kind of takes care of itself. But if you're a chapter who's saying, hey, we were barely making it before, how do we continue to make it? We might be able to help. We are anticipating, and I've been helping chapters budget for a 10% loss, a 20% loss, and a 40% loss. And I'm basing those numbers on what I'm hearing from university presidents, from schools that are opening around the country, and we're trying to gauge what the educational environment's going to look like. We know that there's simply just going to be less undergraduates coming back in the fall and subsequent years, and not because just of COVID. We know that simply because there's not as many kids going to school anymore. There's just less of them, and the dynamic around higher education has definitely changed. So not only are we fighting a pandemic now, we're also fighting lower numbers just in general. If you do need help with financial planning, again, we ask that you reach out to your local grand trustee, because they do have the resources to help with that. And because you're in a regional environment where, for example, if you're budgeting for a chapter house, your budget for a chapter house in the desert is going to be much different than it is in the Midwest. You're going to have HVAC, snow removal in some places, not snow removal in others. And so it's important you get in touch with your grand trustee if you haven't already, so that they can either help you directly or get you involved with the Constantine Housing Initiative staff to move that along. Rich, anything else you have to add to that?
I was going to just say, we have in our archives of the trustees as well, and a lot of people have taken advantage of accessing the archives of the SIG House, where we do have a variety of templates out there to assist you in setting up financial plan or financial budget plans for you too, and things to consider when you're developing those house corporation financial plans. And most of the trustees, I would say, are pretty familiar with how to set up the budgets. So feel free to contact your regional trustee, and if not, my information's there and I can guide you directly to it, and make sure that the regional trustee assists you with those kinds of questions. That's why it's regionalized, because everyone is a different environment. And even within our regions, we have different environments within the college communities.
Absolutely. And I noticed there is a question about the how-to guides and those guides that we have already sent out. And I believe we've posted those on our website, the constantinehousing.org website. And if we haven't, we will do so very quickly. But you can go there immediately and start to download information that we're updating regularly. So in addition to the opening of your chapter house, you're going to find some of the letters that we've already sent out as it pertains to financing and funding. And again, to this bullet point, many of you have taken advantage of the Government Care Act loans. And so to give you kind of a summary on what's going on there, I personally worked with about 10, 11 chapters on making sure that the correct application was being filled out. We did send out, and is posted on our website, a nice, easy Care Act how-to guide. So many of you would not probably apply for the PPP, or Payroll Protection Plan. And the reason is you just simply don't have anybody on your payroll. So if you do have a chef or a house manager or somebody of that nature that is on payroll, you do have the ability to apply depending on your status. But if you are looking for immediate influx of money and to do it in a fairly quick way, the EIDL loans, EDIL loans, emergency disaster loans, all chapters are open to those. Now, it's a first come, first served model, as many of you have probably read in the newspaper already. where when the government runs out of money, they run out of money. But we do know chapters have had that $10,000 that you can apply for in hand within 72 hours. Now, I've heard others that have waited 3 weeks, but the majority of them have gotten it. So that's an easy way to go ahead and just get an influx of cash. We do know that those are being forgiven. And if for some reason they are not, for example, if your 503c status changes or something to that effect changes, and you do have to pay it back, it's at a very low interest rate. And I believe it's hovering under 3% if you do borrow money from the government. So there are options out there for you to get some relief. We've had some unique situations, for example, where an undergraduate chapter pays rent to a house corporation then pays a landlord because they don't own a house. So in that situation, it's very dynamic and different. That's when CHI staff can step in and help guide you to apply in the correct manner and possibly apply in multiple ways. In a situation I just described, the undergraduate chapter could apply in addition to the house corporation applying, because they both are seeing a lack of funds coming in due to COVID-19 and the shutting down of properties. So again, finances we know are going to be a difficult thing to manage. We're advising immediately to start shaving line item categories on your budget where necessary and where you can. Roughly 10% of your operating budget should be going strictly to a reserve fund, and that's at a bare minimum. So that's something you still want to keep, and it's for situations like this. So we can help you with budgets. We have budget templates. I have algorithms that I can run of houses similar age, shape, and size, so that I can show you what their line items look like. And if you want to do some kind of a comparison, we can definitely share with you those ideas. Or if you just want another set of eyes on what you've already created, send it over. We'll give you our input. We are a built-in resource. We're a free resource. And at this time, we're here to strictly help house corporations. Anything any of the other presenters want to add on that specific topic? Okay.
Just an FYI, several of the trustees, their background is in finance. I know Jim Carroll up in the eastern section, his background's finance. Texas is Kelly Park. I believe JB Allen has a finance background. So several of them are there. And Kelly's in the banking industry, so I know he is a real good resource. He's been doing a lot of the SBA loans.
Beautiful. Yes, I know they're even handing them out in their professional lives. I shouldn't use the word handing out, but going through the application process. So the next big topic, the next big topic that we have is understanding the layout of your property. And before I get to that point, it looks like one of our presenters is muted, but it's not being muted by me. So Ted, if you're out there, you are unmuted.
Okay, yeah, I can just see that now. One of the things that, to add to what Rich said about the grant trustees and addressing this to the house corporations, is how can you get a handle and can you work with the council about how many brothers are going to be back in the fall? You know, are they going to be online, or do they anticipate to take a year off, or whatever they're going to do, and of that number, how many are going to possibly be in the house, you know, which would be the basis to start your budget, is what I would think. I'm sure you've all thought of that, but it's actually crucial you get a handle as soon as you can as to what date they're going to start, which you can get from the university, and what they're going to be actually doing when that start date does come. Because from what we've heard in RMF and the numbers for the policies for next year, it's all over the map.
And we've prepared a questionnaire kind of for the trustees that we sent out after our last trustee call. So we're requesting each of the trustees to contact the house corporations in their regions, and then to ask them the questions. There's about 20, when you hear the term 20 questions, yeah, it's pretty close to that, so that we can kind of get a handle as to what the chapters are anticipating as they're coming back, or what the house corporations are anticipating with their chapters in coming back. And that way it'll give them a good idea as to setting up their financial plan, and then also an idea as to what kind of membership we're looking at in the fall. Following up on what Ted said, we don't know how many may be taking a year off now. how may be hesitant to return to campus, how many new members are going to be possible for coming in. I mean, there's a variety of questions to be asked.
And there's a lot of help, and there's and Joe and Justin and the grand trustees, as you said, we've thought about it all. So we're here to help, and don't feel like you're alone or tear your hair out. Reach out for some help and to try and get a handle on the best way to efficiently do this and work out on some of the stuff we're sending out.
Excellent input. And something else that I've learned from my education on this topic is that your undergraduate brothers are your best resource to know who's coming back and to get them to come back. Many times your undergraduate brothers are talking constantly and they know each other better than anyone else. And so if you're trying to gauge what is my budget going to look like, who's coming back, who's not, I would highly recommend leaning on your undergraduate brothers to gain that information. Don't think you need to do that as a house corporation on your own. These undergraduate brothers are willing to cooperate. We're evidence of it at headquarters. It's been overwhelming how much the undergraduates have responded during this time, and they are being responsive and they're being cooperative. So I would highly recommend leaning on them to say, hey, do you guys know if somebody's not coming back? And if so, why aren't they coming back? Can we help them?
And they have the network to be able to do that. Many of the chapters have continued having virtual chapter meetings and stuff like that. So I know they're in very close contact with each other at the chapter level.
And also their headquarters has worked on virtual recruiting. So don't think because of where we're at with COVID that we're stopped dead on personal meetings. There's a whole system of recruiting virtually, which is really well received from the undergrads and the people that are coming into the fraternity. So that kind of number is going to keep building. So don't think that we're stopped dead in our tracks without recruiting.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And then from the risk management standpoint too, that's one of the things, because I'm also on the risk management faculty, we've been talking about that. And as one of the new strategies as to what are you going to do to mitigate the risk when you do have events and activities in your chapter house. So that's another role that the risk management faculty and the risk management foundation has to assist in the chapters, that when you do return, what are additional factors to consider when you're hosting events, activities, and so forth. It's a different dimension than the way we used to have, the preparation for party planning and stuff like that. There's new dimensions to consider.
But also, we've been talking about that first party back. Can you imagine all these guys? They're going to be so happy to see each other. So the social chair is definitely going to be planning that blast. And we're concerned, and you should be concerned as house corporations, of what is that blast going to look like? Where is it going to take place? And what kind of precautions are they going to take to be within the guidelines of what the university wants? Because I'm sure the university is going to be all over everybody for these social guidelines. Yeah.
Absolutely, and your points actually lead to this slide, the end of this slide and the beginning of the next, which is understanding your property. A lot of chapters didn't really think about winterizing, and I use that term loosely because some of you don't even have a winter like we may know it here in the Midwest, but a lot of chapters just left an empty house. When a house is left abandoned, or not abandoned, but empty, it is more dangerous than when there are people in it. Part of the reason is if a pipe bursts, you don't know it. If your hot water tank goes out, you don't know it. So keep in mind that we still need to be worried about closing these houses up. If your house is going to be empty for an extended period of time, if you're under construction or maintenance, there has to be fencing. RMF can provide you with those parameters that our underwriters need when a house is under construction. Boarded up windows are required. There's a lot to think about when a house is empty. Before you even begin to think about opening it back up, we need to make sure that it was closed properly. Now, let's say it's time to reopen. Let's say we get that far and we want to share some best practices on how to do that. Number one is, what if somebody becomes COVID positive after the house is open? So number one is we're trying to understand what most universities and student housing is doing. Some of them have said that they're going to move to single occupancy rooms. We've asked, how are you going to do that? Do you have the capacity to do that? Are you building new dorms? No one has an answer. Right now, the SEC has basically committed to that, but again, no answer on how that's going to be done. In the case of these chapter houses, single occupancy obviously would be the safest. Now, we don't have a playbook for that yet. We're trying to get one. And again, things are changing on a daily basis. So I don't want to give out incorrect or misleading information, but to move to single occupancy may be the best solution. Now, let's think about that. That's capacity. Now, how do we talk about operations? Because that's going to affect your operations. If you move to single occupancy, that probably means that you're going to have less people living in-house. If you have less people living in-house, your budget's going to be different. How do you manage that? So those are the ideas we want you to start thinking about and communicating with us on, so we can walk you through those. Understanding the layout of your property is going to be, it's going to be probably the most important thing that you need to know moving back into the house. And the reason is, if you do need to quarantine someone that contracts the virus after they come back to the house, what we're recommending and what CDC is recommending and universities is to quarantine that person immediately. So find a designated wing, area in the lower level, an area in the upper level, somewhere where you can designate this room, this space is going to be made specifically for this person who's been quarantined. We advise that you keep that person safe and remove them from the property when the safest possible. So we know that there might be situations where that person can't be moved from the house. For example, their parents live overseas. They don't have the funding, a number of reasons. We are currently working with a lot of chapters that stayed open through the entire pandemic for that exact reason. We have the resources and the knowledge to guide you through that. So I'm not going to go into that specific topic at this exact moment, but what I am saying to you is make sure you have a designated area. If somebody does become infected, get them to that quarantined area and then safely remove them from the house. Again, if you can't get them out of the house, contact us. We will help you create a plan to do so safely or keep them in the house quarantined. Anything to add on the insurance side of that, Justin or Steve, just because I know that kind of touches on the insurance aspect a little bit. And I'm making sure that they are not muted.
We're still kind of waiting on our carriers to give some more guidance on these specific questions, kind of a similar vein. You know, we don't want to put out one thing and then have to change it based on their guidance. So we've
understood.
Our broker works with a lot of national fraternities, and a lot of these questions have been submitted to carriers on our behalf.
Understood. So again, keep moving with that topic. A lot of this is dependent on what your local departments are doing, what your university is doing, and what your state is doing. All three of those have to work in harmony in order for any of our suggestions to even work. So again, we're working at that macro level. We're making sure there's resources available for you to use when you get to the point where you need to use them, and you can start using them immediately. But as it comes down to those unique situations, we're here more to help, and we're going out and trying to gain a lot of this information as it becomes available. A huge question that I know we're getting quite a bit of questions on is food. Food is going to be one of those things that's highly regulated. It already is. The FDA has stepped in, and anybody who's providing food to a community such as a school or a chapter house is under fairly high regulation. So we would treat any type of food service personnel you have going in and out of your house as a visitor. So if they're coming into your house, we need to know when and for how long. We would recommend that they have their temperature taken before they step foot into the house. And when it comes to food, some of the basic ideas that we can pass along to you right now is individual servings versus bulk serving. So for as long as our fraternity has been around, I would imagine that bulk serving buffet style food has been the norm. And while we want to promote that brotherhood and make sure everybody's sharing, breaking bread at that same table, at the same time, we're going to tell you not to do that. So what many chapters and food services and our counterparts in other fraternities are doing is moving towards to-go containers. If you have a food service provider, they are well equipped and well aware and are actually getting high discounts on those types of supplies. So to-go containers for every meal, one-time use utensils. So do away with your silverware for the time being and move to plastic or disposable one-time use. We've also even heard of some chapter houses requiring the brothers to bring in their own silverware where they're responsible for cleaning it, maintaining it, and keeping it in their room and bringing it with them. Late plates, again, are going to be to go, and they have to be picked up within a specific period of time. That is put in place more so by the FDA, and they have their reasons behind that. Snacks was a huge issue in the house. So even HG Supply, which I'd mentioned multiple times throughout this presentation, they even have individually packed snacks. So if you do have chips or crackers or anything of that nature that's readily available to the undergraduate brothers, we would highly suggest that you move to individually packaged snacks. Anything else to add from the Grand Trustee side? Anything you guys are hearing out as you talk to chapters?
So far, the food topic hasn't come up too much in any of our interactions, at least from my region.
Excellent. Okay. And I'm just reading through some of our questions to make sure I'm hitting on the.
Yeah. Do we have any questions that come up from anybody that's online that they have, specific questions, or are you waiting to do all the questions at the end?
I'm addressing them as they come, but we will have time. I'm going to go through those we haven't been able to hit, and I will bring those up as soon as we are towards the end, which we're coming to a close here in a second. Again, as we continue to talk about food and preparation for your house, I'd highly recommend going to your food provider to see what they're doing, because they are heavily regulated. So even if we want to put things in place or suggest things, that's going to be overridden by whatever the FDA comes out with. And again, they're probably the highest regulated industry at the moment. As it pertains to cleaning, and I know we're getting a lot of questions, I'm seeing them pop up as it pertains to airborne pathogens and how you go about the cleaning of the house. Here's Kai's stance currently, and RMF for that matter, on how to go about this. We have set up with ServiceMaster a full sanitization service. So they can come into your house if you'd like them to. They will do a full sanitization. They'll do all your high touch points. They'll do all your high contact points, your rugs, your carpets, all of that type of thing at a highly discounted rate of 40 cents per square foot. Now, what's beautiful about that, and again, and I want to congratulate the RMF for stepping up and doing this, and I'm going to actually jump to the next slide with that being said. RMF is committed to leaving no chapter behind. So if you need help, and we can talk about the options on what help looks like once we get down to that point, but if you need help getting your house opened and cleaned for the upcoming school year, SRM is readily available, and RMF/Kai will help subsidize that in some way, shape, or form to make sure that you can get it done if you need the money. After that, what we're going to be highly recommended is regularly scheduled cleaning. What does that look like? Well, in some cases, we're hearing a lot about the sprayers. I have personal experience with the sprayers, and I have positive and negative response from it. I come from a property management background and real estate development background on a commercial and residential side where the sprayers were used on a regular basis. The sprayers, a standard 5-gallon sprayer can, depending on the manufacturer, can cover anywhere from 25,000 to 50,000 square feet if used appropriately. What my fear is are the chemicals that are put into it. Now, you're probably all going to be using SDS sheets to make sure you're not putting some bad chemical inside your house. We've heard of some universities where all the fraternities got together and said, hey, we're going to all buy one sprayer and we're going to use it and designate one person to use it, which I actually think is a good idea as long as that one person has been trained on how to use the device. You want to make sure it's not somebody just willy-nilly going around as an undergrad spraying everywhere, possibly contaminating food if it's left out. So the sprayers are something that we aren't highly recommending, but we're not saying avoid it, because it could be a very economical solution to a time when economics is the basis for a lot of decision making. And so that's kind of our stance right now. Our SRM can also provide regularly scheduled cleanings if you wanted them to come in, and they can do all your high touch points and really dig into the roots of your house and make sure that everything is clean and safe to return to. Again, we would start also saying beef up your line item budget for supplies. HD Supply is a partner of us. We have GSA contracted pricing, which is the equivalent to what the government gets. That was negotiated by Brother Shock, who's on the RMF board of directors. I'm sorry, he's on the CHI board of directors. And really utilize that because they have everything from mops to toilet paper to cleaning supplies. Again, I even mentioned they have snacks. That is readily available to every Sigma Chi chapter. As we continue to talk along these lines, I actually want to move a little bit more onto the risk management side, and that's what this slide talks to that you see up on your screen. So at this point, I'd actually like to hand it over to Justin Brandt just for a few minutes so he can talk at a high level about this and possibly address some of your insurance questions.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So at the RMF, there's really two main types of insurance we provide. One is the property insurance, and best scenario there is if the house burns down type deal, so we insure that loss. And then on the other side is the liability side, which is if a third party sues the chapter for their negligence. Now, our house corporations also are a part of that master liability insurance, but for our purposes, we kind of just separated into the property and the house for the house corporations, and then the liability for the membership. Now, as far as rates go, on the property side of things, our rates are going to be relatively stable. Now, the exposure is also kind of the same. Our rates are pretty much based on the replacement cost value, so the cost to return the house to the condition it was in, or in our case, to replace it at current code if there was a covered loss. So from that standpoint, there shouldn't be many changes to the property rates. Now, maybe some of the difficulty there will be while that fixed expense may be the same, you might have less revenue, which is a sort of a different topic. Now, on the liability side of things, there's a lot of questions. Our liability rates are based on the amount of members in the chapter. Because of the way we do things, we kind of base that on the number of members in the chapter the prior year. This year, we're going to change it up a little bit, and we've automatically reduced that number quite a bit. And we're going to be working with undergraduate leadership on that. But of course, I understand there's typically some crossover there with the house corporation. The main thing we want to do is we realize that our ultimate bill to the insurance companies may be higher this year. But nevertheless, we want to assure our membership that we're going to do our best to keep rates stable, meaning that the cost per man on the liability side is staying the same, and on the property insurance, the rates are staying the same. So we just sent out our renewals over the last week or so, and we'll continue to be in touch with everyone, and our invoices will be sent in August.
Excellent. And I just looking through some of these questions and make sure we're addressing as many as we can in our allotted time. And that answered a few of the questions that I see coming in here and there. And I know we lost Rich for a second to a power outage.
I just got back online. We had a power outage here.
Excellent.
And Joe, this is Steve, if I might just add something to Justin's comments.
Please.
And yes, Justin mentioned the renewal information has gone out.
Just kicked off and it's back on. Sorry.
As part of that, in that renewal email, we have put together a FAQ of the most common questions we've been receiving, which I encourage everyone to read through. And also just to reiterate Justin's point that in order both to keep the property rates stable and essentially to discount undergraduate chapter rates by 25% across the board, despite the increase that we're expecting in the market, RMF has been prepared to put up to $2 million toward this cause. And all of that is because we understand the financial hardship this places on chapters. But one of the things that's important to understand about our program is because the RMF has taken such a high retention, particularly for undergraduate chapters, where we pay out of pocket the first $1 million of any and every claim. In order to do that, our rates are basically on a 3-year rolling cycle. and those are largely claims driven. So we get a lot of questions about, well, we weren't in school from mid-March until mid-May, which of course we understand, but the impact on that in terms of the way that our program is priced is not felt until 2 or 3 years down the road, when we understand whether or not we have more claims and lawsuits arising from that time period. So I want people to understand we are on top of this. We're looking at it very carefully. As I said, the RMF board is putting significant dollars, betting significant dollars today on the activity and lack of claims that we're expecting during this period, but that will not be recouped in a large sense for 18, 24, 36 months from now.
Great, thank you, Steve. And I noticed a couple questions came in. Justin, would you mind speaking to the average occupancy versus last year? I know we mentioned it on the staff call this morning, but we have a couple questions about that, and you did a really good job of explaining that this morning.
Yeah, just typing that up. So the first thing is that occupancy of the house does not impact the insurance. So it's not necessarily, hey, we had 50 guys in the house and 50 guys out of the house. That is not really a factor for us. Now, I think what this individual is asking, Garnett, is that the invoice that we included with renewals was actually this current year's invoice, the 1920 invoice. And the reason we included that is because we wanted to almost send the worst case scenario or the most conservative scenario. And that's if you budget for this year based on the total that, or for next year based on this year's numbers, then you'll, in almost 90% of the cases, you'll be more than fine. Really, if you wanted to do a different way to actually estimate your membership, you could just do a kind of a quick $200 times the number of people you anticipate to be in the chapter this year. Of course, we couldn't do that and submit that to the underwriters given all the uncertainty. So again, those invoices last year are just so, hey, if I need to know, best case scenario, how much money should I set aside for insurance, I would do that. But of course, things are going to be a little different this year.
Thank you for addressing that. It's very helpful. I'd also like to thank RMF because I deal a lot with our counterparts around the world, and none of the other fraternity systems have been given this foundation to stand on. For an entity within Sigma Chi to stand up and say we are designating $2 million of our money to making sure that no chapter is left behind is very powerful. For me coming in as a newer member of the organization, that's just a testament to the strong arms. And to know that we have that is incredible, actually, because there's a lot of fraternity systems out there that are very scared right now. And we're not scared, we're actually encouraged. We're encouraged because we know that this is a learning lesson. We've been here before, we can do it again, and we have a strong foundation to work on. So thank you very much to the Risk Management Foundation and their board of directors, because this is no small feat, and this is something that should be acknowledged. So just wanted to touch on that. There's a couple questions coming in about air purifiers. An air purifier is not necessarily going to help with COVID-19. Now, will it help with air circulation and the quality of air within the house? Yes. But it's not going to eliminate viruses from your general house. Number one, if the virus is living on something, it's not going to live long enough for the air purification system to do anything to it. But there are air purification systems that can work within your HVAC system. If you have powered air HVAC system, they're quite expensive. Actually, one of our chapters down in Miami, Florida, installed them, and I actually have the data sheet on them. They are a little bit effective, actually quite effective in this specific scenario, but they are upwards of $1,500 to $3,000 a piece. So if you're out there just looking for a normal air purifier, it's probably not going to do you much justice or show you a return on your investment. I would actually suggest more so moving that money towards regularly scheduled cleanings, disinfectant sprays, and getting a janitorial service in on a regular basis. Some of the other questions we have: how is the liability insurance handled for a colony? I know we have a couple colonies on the phone. Is that something Justin or Steve, you guys can speak to?
I got it. So for the, like I said, the per man rate for the active chapters is 197 per man. For the colony side of things, that rate is actually 150 per man to help give them a little leg up. And then actually, in previous years, the fraternity has also covered half of that. We anticipate that will continue in moving forward. And the way we calculated the amount of members in the colony was also different from the chapter, so they don't have quite the complexity that the regular chapters will. So I anticipate very little change in the colony thing. And again, for easy, yeah.
Great, thank you. As I change to the following slide, I wanted to ask Ted and Rich, anything else to input on any topic whatsoever?
Unmute, Rich. Unmute, Rich.
Unmute. Yep, I got it. Now, I think you pretty well covered our topics. One of the things that I think we need to consider, the positive kind of information that we can send out through the chapter from the house corporations to the chapter to the parents as to what kind of proactive position we're taking is going to have a big effect on both the occupancy of the house as well as the credibility and comfort levels of our parents having the guys return to the houses. I think we need to seriously keep that in mind. That's going to be a big factor to mitigate the apprehension about returning to houses. In those houses that may have been in less than, I want to say, quality standards of cleanliness, this is a time in which we need to step up and make sure that they are examples of the quality that we expect and that they are a safe environment for our brothers to live in.
Yeah, I'd like to just add to that, that university-owned housing, one would think that they meet the standards for the university, but I've had instances in some of the when I was at Grand Prater that the brothers really have to get on the case of the university to get the house cleaning up to standard. So any house corporation that has university-owned housing, and of course in my former province there was a few of them that were like that. You really have to make sure you as the house corp or work with the Undergrad Brothers to make sure that the university meets their obligations to keep the house as safe as it can.
Yeah, we often have several of ours where the fraternities are in university housing and they consider them, the stepchild of the university, and where the living conditions that they assign to the fraternities are not of the same quality as what the general population is on the campus. And that's why, we strongly advocate that all chapters have a house corporation, whether they be in university owned or, the house corporation owned environments, because they need to have an adult group speak up on behalf of the brothers.
Yeah, and Joe and Justin can help you with that too. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I want to keep driving the point home that Chi is a new entity within the Sigma Chi world. We're here to help. We're an entity that many other fraternity systems don't have. We're here to help you with financing. We're here to help you with property management resources. We even have the ability and are beginning to poise ourselves so that we don't lose critical chapters. You'll notice that one of the taglines of the Constantine Housing Initiative is to preserve, and that's primarily around preserving title. So if there's a chapter that happens to lose its charter or is not inhabited for quite a period of time, Chi can step in and in some way, shape, or form use its resources to preserve the title of that chapter house, get the legs underneath them and get that chapter back reestablished on campus. So to say the least, we are well ahead of the curve with the other Greek systems, but I think we have a long journey ahead of us. It's changing daily. There's a lot of questions we don't have answers to, and rather than try and come up with something, I want to be open and honest and let everybody know that we will get you answers if we don't have them right now. And as you'll see on your screen, you have quite a bit of contact. So you have your Grand Trustee, which can help you regionally. We have Service Master for cleaning and sanitizing, and it's hard to put out there I know that at first a lot of chapters were asking for a general guideline, how to clean my house. So that is part of the Opening Your House pamphlet that is posted on our website and was sent out and provided by ServiceMaster. But it's nearly impossible for us to sit here and say, here are the guidelines, because every house is so different. We have houses with pools, we have houses with multiple buildings, we have some ranch, we have some 3-story. And so to come up with a specific cleaning regimen for you on a webinar is difficult, but I can promise you if you reach out to us, we will get in touch with you back. We will make sure that there's a plan put in place and that we make it very specific to your chapter. ServiceMaster is a master in this. This is what they specialize in. So Cal McCarty, who you'll see his name on the screen, he can work with you and have his local guys come in, show you a layout of your house where they believe you need the most help, and work with you on that level. So again, we have ServiceMaster, HD Supply, you have RMF, CHI, the Grand Trustees, and then you have ServiceMaster and HC Supplies. So another question that's been coming in is having the undergraduates clean. And by way of the way that the general fraternity has gone, that is not something that we promote or have support in whatsoever. Undergraduates are not to be cleaning the chapter houses. And so those types of questions, there's questions we really can't even answer. We have to recommend and do recommend bringing in a professional cleaning service. Cleaning is considered some type of a hazing ritual, and therefore it's not permitted at any level within our fraternity system. So needed to address that because I did see that come up a few times in the question log.
And I think another input at this point is that, you know, using an outside agency that has a certification standard that is, you know, recognized and they can produce that verification is another aspect of adding credibility as to what's being done. If it's just done simply by a bunch of caring guys that are members of the House Corporation or expecting it to be done by the brothers, that does not have a high confidence factor within the public or the university perception, and especially with local health departments. I'd be very, very reluctant. You need to have almost like a third party verifying the fact that it is, you know, up to a certain quality standard of cleanliness.
And we do have that through ServiceMaster. So ServiceMaster can provide what they would do in your house. And if you wanted something to base off of, you can use them as your benchmark. And again, I want to clarify, we get a lot of the questions about the pledges cleaning the house. And again, I have to say over and over again that you cannot have those pledges cleaning your house. And we do not promote that in any way, shape, or form. The undergraduates, while they do have it is their house and they have the ability to clean the house, it has to be done very strategically. We can give you parameters on how that's done, but it is not something where certain members of the house can be required to do it while others are not. So that I'm kind of going to leave that at that. It's a whole nother topic, but we are here to answer questions. So any questions we did not get to, we're approaching having a minute or two left. I'm going to put up on the screen the contact information for those that presented today. Do any of the other presenters have anything else to add at this time?
No, that's great. Good. We're here to help, and hopefully the House corporations will take advantage of our offer of assistance. Yeah.
And we just ask that all the members that are the House corporations that are on this, as well as those who are not, we're expecting our grand trustees to make an email contact with you and then follow it up with a personal contact. And like I said, trying to get those answers to the 20 questions out there that we proposed, so that that information we can use as a data source to not only provide personal assistance to each of the House corporations, but also to collect data that would be helpful for CHI and RMF down the road.
Excellent. Well, with the few seconds left we have remaining, I want to thank Steve, Justin, Rich, and Ted. I can't thank everybody enough. RMF, the staff, our House corporations, thank you for all the work you do. You guys are not given the accolades that you need. This is a tough time. We're here to help. There's strong arms around you, and we wish you all the best in the weeks to come. So with that, we'll be signing off. Duties performed, and everybody have a great evening.
Yeah.
Stay healthy, everybody.
Yeah. Take care, everybody. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.